Well, it's just after 9 a.m. On the Pacific Coast, and it is 12 on the East Coast, and I think we're ready to begin. I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. So first and foremost, hello and welcome to WID's second Global Disability and Disaster Town Hall. I'm Kat Zigmont, I'm WID's Director of Operations. First, I would like to announce that we are recording this meeting. It is also currently being streamed live on WID's Facebook page, which is facebook.com/World Institute on Disability. And I would be happy to put that in the chat for everybody right now. Additionally, we have captions built in to the Zoom meeting, but if you prefer, I'm putting an additional link to captions that will give you a full screen of captions. So, after we present opening remarks, we will start with some speakers who submitted a request to speak, and then we'll open it up to all attendees who want to share their experience. If you would like to speak, you can submit a request via our chat feature. Just simply say, I'd like to speak, and you will be added to the queue. We'll also be monitoring the Facebook live feed, and we can relay short stories on people's behalf. If you are selected to speak, please begin by saying your name, where you're from, and your organization if you have one. We want to try and hear from as many people as possible, so please keep your remarks to 2 to 3 minutes, outline the issue you're raising, and potential solutions. Ultimately, we want to learn what disability-led organizations need to continue their operations to meet the needs of people with disabilities in this COVID-19 pandemic, in other disasters you've experienced, and disasters sure to come. We also want to hear about your experiences in seeking and obtaining disaster relief funding for preparing for disasters, your operations during disasters, and your involvement in community recovery. We want to understand what's working and what's not working. So when I select an individual to speak, I would like to remind you to speak loudly for the captioners and interpreters and slowly. We would love all speakers to open their video feed when it is their time to speak. When you're chosen, I'll change your status from attendee to panelist, and there'll be a brief interruption of your connection, but don't worry, it's 2 or 3 seconds, and then you'll be back in the webinar. Additionally, we will have 3 survey poll questions that we'll be asking you all to answer. When a poll is launched, you'll receive a notification on your device that will include the question and multiple choice answers. This is an accessible process, and we will be reading the questions and answers for you to choose from out loud as it's captioned and signed. Everyone will have time to make a selection, and whenever all the answers have come in, we will show everybody the results of the poll. Lastly, we do hope you will share and tweet about this WID Hall listening session. And it's very important issues that are being raised today. We would love it if you would use the hashtag WIDTownHallC19 on various social media platforms, and I will also put that in the chat for everybody. Okay, well, I think that's all the housekeeping we have today. I'm going to turn it over to Marcy Roth, WID's Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer, who will kick us off today. Thank you, Marcy.
Hello, everyone. I really appreciate having the opportunity to once again bring folks together. And to get us started this morning, I first want to turn over to my dear friend and ally, Herman Perotti, who is the co-executive director of the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, WID's partner today and in all of our disaster and disability work. Herman will share his thoughts about solidarity for all who are calling for an end to police violence following the murder of George Floyd. Herman?
This is Herman Parodi. Thank you, Marcy. You know, the partnership, real quick, is the only U.S.-based disability-led organization focused on cross-disability, inclusive public health, and emergency management. Last Monday, May 25th, as Marcy just explained, and you know, all of you have seen on the news or may have participated in your countries in support against the murder of George Floyd. We condemn the police violence and racism that has led to this death, and so many more. In solidarity with Black and Indigenous communities and people of color, we demand justice for all victims of police violence across the United States and across the globe. Systematic racism is not new. Many of us across the globe have experienced it cross-generationally with different names: colonialism, imperialism. The fact of the matter is, right now, across the globe, we do not need harmful systems. We need to call them out together and create spaces that do not further disrupt the already difficult experiences that we are all together in through this quarantine facets. And the impact psychologically on all of us individually and as a society needs to change, because it is people with disabilities, it is those of us most marginalized that will not see the time through. Please join us along with WID, ONG Inclusiva, and so many others in your countries, in your communities. Call out harmful racist systems. This is not the time to be doing this. In fact, this is the time to come together and change. We need to do this. It is a disaster, and it is our focus to reduce their risks. They are not going to go away in a day. But when situations like this rise, our traditional systems fail. We are based, myself and Shaylin, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where there is no access to food. There is no access to pharmacies because they've been boarded up or vandalized. The situation must change because there is pain. And in this pandemic that is still not gonna go away, it is time for all of us to come together with a unified voice of peace, love, and unity. I'll close up with remarks from within efforts of the partnership. You will find on our website a statement against police brutality and racism. We are beginning collaboration across our region with the Disaster Risk Reduction and Disability Network of Latin America and the Caribbean. And we look forward to further establish community resilience modules that can be in multiple languages with a lens of COVID-19 and public health lens, because the work must continue. We must do it together. Back to you, Marcy.
Thank you very much, Herman. We appreciate and respect your leadership and your strong voice here in the US and globally. WID joins in the call for an immediate end to police violence against Black people. The cruel injustices faced by people with disabilities must also end. WID joins in calls for redirecting funding for mass incarceration and institutionalization. Funds used for programs that allow and perpetuate violence, abuse, and neglect must immediately be redirected to resources, services, and programs needed for people to live in freedom at home and in their community. Since March, hundreds of thousands of people with disabilities, perhaps even millions across the world, have died from COVID-19. Disproportionately, these are disabled people of color who have experienced violence and neglect that is farther exacerbated in disasters. I also want to take a moment. WID remembers disability justice leader Stacey Parks Milburn, founder of the Disability Justice Culture Club, who died 2 weeks ago. Stacey and I were allies in our disaster and disability work, and her leadership was and always will be a very bright star for so many to follow in our commitment to relentlessly working towards achieving disability justice in all of our work. Again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We have had over 300 people RSVP. They were joining us today on Zoom. We have many, many others who are joining us on Facebook Live. As you may have discovered from our last town hall, we will be sharing the captioned video of this event on our website as soon as we can get that captioning embedded for sharing. I am excited to tell you that we have folks joining us today from at least 25 countries and from 6 of the 7 continents. The only continent that is not represented on the call today is Antarctica. And we need to work to make sure that the next time we all come together that we do in fact have folks joining us from all 7 continents. During our first Global Disability and Disaster Town Hall, we learned some very interesting information from each of you. We asked some questions. We will also do that today. And we wanted to understand whether disability-led organizations are able to access disaster relief funding from government, corporations, and foundations. We discovered that, in fact, everyone who responded to our poll agreed that at best, sometimes folks were, only sometimes folks were left out, but a resounding 64% told us, yes, definitely, disability-led organizations are left out of disaster relief funding. We also asked, during this COVID-19 pandemic, do disability-led organizations have what they need to serve their local communities? And only 2% answered that yes, definitely, disability organizations have what they need to serve their local communities in the pandemic. So today, we will use this time to hear from folks from across the continents who have asked to tell us what their experience is, what the experience is of their disability-led organizations, and we will get some more information from each of you, and we will end the day with some information about where we hope to go from here, where you all might want to be involved in this continuing discussion, and how we might be ready for the next disasters, whether it is a concurrent disaster to the pandemic, or whether it is any of the disasters to follow. So we've reviewed our May town hall and the purpose of today's webinar. And so I'm going to ask Kat to lead us through our first poll for the day. Over to you, Kat.
Sure thing. Thank you. All right. So, launching our first poll. Our first poll question is, would you like to be part of an alliance between disability-led organizations and funders that could accelerate resources? The answers are yes, definitely, or no. And we'll give people a little bit of time to vote. I see about 40% of you have voted so far. And I've just shared the results. As you can see, we had 93% yes, definitely, and 7% no. So the overarching majority would like to be part of alliance between disability-led organizations and funders. So very interesting and good information. And shall we start with some of our speakers, Marcy?
That sounds great, Kat. Glad to see we have so many folks who want to continue this discussion and continue to work together. Our first speaker is Robert Ngwandu from Uganda. We are so pleased to have you here, Robert, and look very much forward to hearing what you have to share with us. Please go ahead.
And Robert, go ahead and share your camera. One moment.
I saw Robert a moment ago, but not quite yet. So
yeah, he is here.
Give him another moment, and then we can always come back.
Absolutely. Robert?
This is Marcy. Why don't we keep working with Robert on technology?
Yes.
And, let's now turn to Misty Dion. Misty has been leading a really exciting effort in the U.S., in Pennsylvania, and we were really pleased to have the opportunity to hear from Misty. Please go ahead.
Hi, Marcy, and all others joining us. Thank you for having me. My name is Misty Dion, and I work with the Roads to Freedom Center for Independent Living in North Central Pennsylvania. I'm a member of our state Pennsylvania Adapt and national chapters, and I am the president for the Pennsylvania Council on Independent Living. Through COVID-19, we have continued to deliver non-essential life-sustaining services remotely and essential and life-sustaining services often in person with protection, personal protective equipment and social distancing practices when possible. We are working even more now, or harder now, I should say, to save the lives of the many people we serve that are currently locked in congregative settings. We've recently built a program that focuses on providing relief and relocation services for the individuals in these settings. As you've all seen across the nation, congregate settings are both unsafe and inhumane. In our state alone, 70% of the COVID deaths have resulted from congregated settings. In the county that we are located in, 100% of those deaths are in one nearby facility, which is what caused us to work with our local hotel owners, restaurant owners, the state, and commissioners to activate this relief and relocation program. It is our hope that many others will be able to offer similar programs like this so that the people living in these congregated settings have the chance of survival. In many of these settings, they're sharing rooms with more than 2 people, and there's very rarely a location where they can be safe or practice social distancing. I hate to use the analogy of these buildings being on fire, but to me, that is exactly what's happening. And in many cases, as we see in these settings, when there is a fire, people with disabilities who otherwise could evacuate are being told to bunker down. We're against this, and we're working hard to free our people locked in these settings. Thank you, Marcy.
Thank you, Misty, and much appreciate your leadership. Unfortunately, I now have very loud noise outside my door, so I'm going to move on very quickly to Dairo Reyes from Colombia with Asa Cornet, who will speak about what has been happening in both the healthcare and education sector and the lack of services. And Dairo, forgive me, I'm sure I butchered your name.
Hi, Marcy. Unfortunately, I don't see Dairo today. So I am going to, I think we should move on to Asha from India. I'm so sorry. Let me see if I can get Asha. Asha is connected. And she is from SMRC in India and would like to speak on issues of women with disabilities. Asha, go ahead and share your camera if you like. Oh, there she is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, Marcy. Okay. Good to see all of you. I wanted to talk about women with disabilities because we have been working on that for a very long time and had a big project on Article 19. And then when the lockdown came, we were told to shut down the whole of the country in 4 hours. So you can imagine people without Medicare, without food. So it was a huge, huge issue because we could not get to people physically, and very
Oh no.
One of the challenges, this is Marcy speaking. Asha's back.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
We have a storm blowing, so that's why the power keeps going on and off the internet. But it's just that to let you know that the issue of women with disability has been mostly food insecurity. There has been no food for many of them. The access to food is very, very difficult. And also because all the outpatient in the hospitals are closed, they cannot go to hospital to get for other issues besides COVID. So that is a major, major issue. And now they're talking about bringing telemedicine, and telemedicine without accessibility means that most of them will not get any sexual or reproductive health care at all. So these are major issues. The third one is that of homelessness. A lot of people out on the streets because they've been thrown out of their homes, many women, and that has created a lot of insecurity, not only, and also a lot of sexual abuse of women. So that is another issue. Another one that we are having is with the quarantines. Though the government has said that the quarantines, the men and women, there will be separate rooms. But in a school where there are 500 people in a quarantine, and with 5 toilets, it's not possible to do that. So again, there is the issue of accessibility into the quarantines. Then many times personal attendants are not allowed, and women find all these issues a very, very big, what cannot be, it's impossible to overcome that, especially when you have no access to them. So we have been trying with the government to sort out some of these issues, but we feel that all of you should write to the Secretary General and to the UN agencies, that at least to the state parties, now instead of, since COSP is not going to be there at the moment, that they should at least tell them that these women
While we're waiting for Asha to reconnect, this is Marcy. Asha is calling on all of us to write to the Secretary General of the United Nations and to the states parties due to the fact that the Conference of States Parties for the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is currently canceled. Go ahead, Asha.
Yeah, so that is one thing, that if something could be done for forum like these, to write to the Secretary General and to the UN agencies to do something, it would really be very, very helpful. We are working in the country, the National Disaster Management Authority, which is now the authority in charge of the pandemic. I wrote the disability guidelines for them last year, but that did not include the pandemic. So now we have to redo the whole thing, which we have done to some extent, but is still needed. We need a lot of legal aid. And I think one thing that you pointed out, we have no funding. No means zero funding. So how do you work when you have something like a zero funding? The budget for employment for women with disabilities, even general, is 0.002%. For education, it is 0.03%. So how do you take care or support these services? I think I'll stop here because since the power is going on and off, but if you want anything later, we could always chat about that. Thank you so much, Marcy, for having me.
Thank you so much, Asha. Your continued leadership is a very powerful model for so many of us. And your call, certainly for funding, but as well for legal aid assistance, and your call for all to write to the Secretary General and the state's parties. We will follow up and provide everybody with information on how to do that. Thank you very much. And I am now going to turn to yet another incredible ally, Eric Rosenthal from Disability Rights International, has been working tirelessly on the dangers that people face in institutions for many, many years. And I will now turn to Eric to share with us. Eric, go ahead, please.
Yep. Can you start my video? Would that be possible?
This is Marcy. We can't start your video. Only you can do that.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. Thanks to the World Institute on Disability for organizing this very important event. Learning a lot from hearing these different perspectives. I am the founder and director of Disability Rights International. We've worked for 25 years to bring the protections of international human rights law to protect people with disabilities. We're especially concerned about children and adults who are detained in institutions where they are subject to the most severe abuses known to humanity. International human rights law not only protects their rights, but protects their right to be part of society under the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. The problems that we've been seeing here in the United States, very high death rates in nursing homes and other institutions for people with disabilities, we are seeing growing on a grand scale on the international level. It's not just elders, it's a broad array of people in many, many countries. There are 10 million children in institutions, 2, 3, 4 times that many. We are concerned here in the United States about the incarceration of people based upon race and other forms of oppression. Well, the institutions of the world are the dumping grounds for people based upon their disability, based upon LGBT identification. Women are subject to violence and trafficking. And now we've spent years warning about the dangers of institutionalization. In the COVID-19 epidemic, we are seeing very high death rates and great dangers. One of the earlier speakers likened this to a house on fire. That's exactly how we see it. And immediate action needs to be taken, not only to protect people inside these institutions, but to call into question why are they there in the first place, to get them out of the facilities as soon as possible. The UN High Commissioner on Human Rights has adopted a very important resolution to governments and to international aid agencies around the world. And I'm going to quote from it. It says, it calls on governments to discharge and release persons with disabilities from institutions and promptly ensure the provision of support in the community and fund those support services. And maybe even more important, it says that we need to recover better by adopting and reinforcing deinstitutionalization strategies to close institutions and return people to the community, strengthening supports of services for people with disabilities and older persons. It's a powerful mandate from the international community to end institutionalization, not wait for the end of the emergency, do it before the next wave. My organization, in alliance with activists throughout the world, are putting on 2 important webinars next Thursday and Friday. I'll put the link in the chat on this Zoom, and we will have announcements on our website at driadvocacy.org. The UN Special Rapporteur on Disability, Catalina Devandas, will be speaking out on this. The chair of the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities from Nigeria, Basharu Denlamu, will be speaking out on this on Thursday, the 11th. It's very important, and please join us. On Friday, we will be holding a webinar in Spanish that focuses on both the global challenges and the challenges to implementation in the Americas. Amalia Gamio from Mexico, who's a member of the CRPD committee, will be speaking, along with Maria Soledad Cisternas, who is the United Nations General Assembly's Special Representative on Accessibility for People with Disabilities, and historic first, the President of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, Joel Hernandez, and Esmeralda Troitino from Jamaica, who's the rapporteur on children. This is an incredible combination of people in the mainstream human rights community and the disability rights community coming together to demand immediate action to get people out of institutions now and bring them to safety. We must work together. Please look at the driadvocacy.org website for information on how to register. Please join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Eric. We applaud your ongoing powerful leadership and want to join you in any way we can to support the work that you're doing, to amplify next week's events, and on an ongoing basis, connect the folks who are committed to doing this work to you, to make sure we are able to work in support of the efforts underway.
Thank you for your support. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Lead on. So I see that Robert is back on, but are we going to Rachel and then to Robert, Kat?
Correct, yes. We'll hear from Rachel next.
Very good. So I am now going to welcome Rachel Inegbedion with Special Needs Initiative for Growth from Nigeria. Welcome, Rachel, and again, I apologize if I didn't quite get your name right. Please help me to get it right next time.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rachel from Nigeria, and I am the founder and project lead of Special Needs Initiative for Growth. We provide empowerment tools and resources for persons with special needs, and we link them to where they can get jobs and entrepreneurship. So today, I'll be talking about how we can support in providing the right learning alternatives for people and students living with special needs in developing countries during the pandemic era. Now, for us, inclusive education is a core part of UNESCO's Sustainable Development Goal and 2030 education agenda. It respects the needs of children and discourages any form of discrimination, irrespective of their physical, intellectual, and emotional challenges. Presently in Africa, it estimates a total of over 85 million persons with disabilities, and a current study across developing countries cited the prevalence of developmental disability varied from 0.4% to about 12.17%, and then 20.4% screened for developmental impairment among other physical, sensory, and intellectual disabilities. Now, given the circumstances surrounding the global pandemic, students with disabilities in developing countries like my country, Nigeria, have been deprived, excluded, and segregated from therapeutic and educational resources, as opposed to their non-disabled peers who gain remote learning and adapt to several learning opportunities during this period. It is quite obvious that we need to do more in terms of providing students with disabilities with a wide learning alternative. Now, before I quickly talk about the solutions, I would like to highlight few challenges that students with disabilities in developing countries experience. Although some developing countries are making use of e-learning, radio, television platforms for their kids to meet their needs. But for physically challenged children, most of the accessibility settings for online learning might not be useful to them because they're not designed specifically for special education. And for example, graph charts, mathematical models may still not be correctly deciphered by a text-to-speech software for someone who is visually impaired. Also, radio programs for people with hearing impairments, some of them may not be able to afford a sign language interpreter. And then we talk about the glossary to data, to internet connectivity. For some of these parents with special needs, it's really very expensive. Now, some of the parents in developing countries like Nigeria express great concerns of not being able to have appropriate work-home balance with their kids. They're used to professional caregiving, and they provide special services for their children if they prefer that for their kids in school. So not being in school for a student with special needs adds frustration to the child and could even increase his or her level of aggression, anxiety, and eventually depression. Moreover, for the schools teachers in developing countries, some of them experience difficulties in contacting the families of the students with special needs. Some of the parents don't provide the right data, and teachers get so worried because of the communication gap during this period, and the students miss out on important learning experiences that could stimulate their therapeutic and academic skills. Now, I would like to highlight some of the key solutions. This is a period when we need to see ourselves as interconnected. Developed countries lending a hand to underdeveloped and developing countries to achieve sustainable development goals, which are inclusive and quality education for all children, irrespective of disability. And then we can then reduce inequality. The pandemic has taught us to be our brother and sister keeper and helping us to provide alternative and supportive learning resources for children with special needs. Even if you're not a teacher, a caregiver, or a special needs educator, or even a parent, all we need to do is encourage a network of humanness as we learn to develop small community forums where every stakeholder in that particular community devises adaptive learning opportunities that meet with each student with disability learning style or their pattern. This sort of small community forum will build a sustainable collaboration between home and school, and it will build a network of small community-based disability practitioners who will act to link the school and home and help with adaptive materials that will suit a child with disability exact needs, as well as his or her behavioral and therapeutical skills. Also, this is the best time for developing country government to formulate national policies on inclusive education if they have not been doing so. The pandemic is teaching us how to do things uniquely. So for developing countries, we should learn how to utilize the opportunity of this pandemic to affect positive and lasting therapeutic and academic changes for students and people in its special educational sector. It should be intentional about helping students with disabilities thrive along with their non-disabled counterparts. Now, to end this, I want to carefully reiterate that it's really important to see that a child with disability is a child first. And then we can focus on raising a child as part of a community. Secondly, childhood is a critical time for the development of a human being. And whether we like it or not, it sets the foundation for their adulthood, so that it's really key that we ensure to build our children and young adults with disabilities into becoming stronger and resilient adults, which in turn would create a better future for this current world that we're living in. So thank you so much for listening, and I'm open to questions.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Really appreciate all that you're reporting on, and want to make a particular note to your comment about what an important opportunity we have before us right now.
Thank you.
We have a big decision ahead of us. Do we go backwards? Do we stay stuck where we are? Or do we seize the moment and use all of the crisis around us to move forward, and particularly with a commitment to children and adults with disabilities who can, in fact, be very much a part of the change that needs to happen, but it will require intentional effort. And so thank you very much, Rachel. And I think hopefully we are ready for Robert. Let's see if we get the technology. I think we need to mute Robert's non-video. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Welcome, Robert, and we are so pleased that you were able to make your technology work, and look forward to learning from what you have to tell us. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon. Good afternoon to all. I'm happy to be here, and I have my Ugandan interpreter here with me. My Ugandan interpreter will speak with me, I believe, rather than the American interpreter or the international sign interpreter. I believe he needs the sound.
This is Marcy, and what we'll do is mute
Hello.
Robert's video. There we go. Thank you.
Can you hear me, everyone?
This is Marcy.
I want to talk more.
Yes.
I want to talk more about disability inclusion. I am Robert Nkwang. Disability inclusion special about the disability program. But more, it is my personal profession and the challenges. It is which is connected to COVID and the lockdown, most especially in Uganda.
Robert, I'm going to pause for a moment. I believe your interpreter is getting picked up on the sound on your computer. If you can mute your computer as well as muting here, then let's try that one more time. And otherwise, we will ask the international sign interpreter to step in. Okay, it looks like we need to move to the international sign interpreter, please.
Okay, hello. Hello, everyone. All right, very good. Okay, so I'm not sure if my interpreter is going to speak or...
This is Marcy, and we were getting a lot of feedback. If your interpreter is on the same computer, then we can mute. I'm sorry. If your interpreter is not on the same computer, then they need to mute their sound and speak through your computer.
Okay, is it better now?
No, I'm afraid it's not. Shall we have, oh, yeah, please go ahead.
Is it good?
No, it's only good when we hear the international sign interpreter. When we hear your interpreter, there's echo, or else we don't hear your interpreter at all.
Okay, then I'll use the international sign interpreter then. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much. As I was saying, my name and as I said, I work in inclusion and disability here in Uganda. And I am focusing in particular on the lockdown and that issue in the lockdown. I think my interpreters will work better. My interpreter can speak it more clearly. So now here in Uganda, we are on lockdown. And the government, of course, has issued this telling people all to stay in their homes. And as a result, people have no work and they stay in their homes. But the people who have disabilities, for instance, people who use sign language, are unaware of this. They're unable to access food, and they're also living out on the streets often and have no homes to stay in for the lockdown. So their life, their electricity is also cut off as a result, and they go without food. And there's also a problem with getting food to people so that people are suffering from food insecurity. So people are now without employment as they stay in their homes. And as a result, people are hungry, they are without food. And so now I'm trying to take the lead on working with those people as many of them are asking me and reaching out to me with this need, asking for food in particular, so that we can easily distribute the food to those people who need it. And this is because the government is unaware of this. They do not communicate well with people who use sign language. The government knows nothing about people with disabilities. So this is an ongoing frustration. People with disabilities, there's no information from people with disabilities. There's no information on the television. They have no access to this information. So organizations of the DPOs have been contacted asking for help, and we are responsible for providing this food as a result. But it is my feeling that this responsibility truly belongs to the government. And we cannot do this alone. We were unable to do this alone. We need to disseminate this information, and there needs to be technology available to provide this information to people with disabilities. This is in particular a problem for people who are deaf and people who are deaf-blind. We have a large number of people who are in this situation. They depend on information through tactile sign language, and they're not receiving this information. So we must go lobby the government to provide this, and in particular to create a task force. So that we can increase the number of resources available for these people with disabilities. And they can have increased representation, in particular, on that task force within the DPOs. Because DPOs have no authority to make these changes. We depend on support from the United States and from Europe to provide funding to our organizations. But our government itself is not providing any funding or any support to our DPOs. So we must lobby those governments to provide additional support so that we can use the funding that they give to meet the needs of the people with disabilities. And it's so important that we do this. It's absolutely essential. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robert, for your hard work, for your leadership, and for this very important call for resources. And I'd like for us all to focus a little bit more on resources. The next poll addresses exactly that. So let's turn back to Kat, and she will take us through our next opportunity to provide feedback.
Thank you so much, Marcy. All right. Oh, one moment, please. There we go. I will be launching the next poll, and the next poll question is, what resources are most needed to support disability-led organizations? And you can select all that apply. The options that we have listed are funding or monetary assistance, technical assistance for remote work operations, communication or office equipment for remote work, disability equipment, interpreters, or other accessibility accommodations, personal care attendant services, personal protective equipment, legal assistance, training on any of the following: preparedness, capacity building, bias, rights, education and child care supports, or other. If we missed what your greatest need is, please go ahead and put that in the chat box and we will collect them as well. And I can see that people are voting, so I will give them just a few minutes to do so. At the moment, it looks like funding is the top aid needed, and training, or sorry, disability equipment and accommodations is the next one. The numbers are jumping. Give people just a couple more minutes. I see there's still voting happening. Okay, great. Well, I will end the polling and share the results. And let's see what people said. So funding is by far 93% the top resource needed currently. And let me see, it does look like disability equipment, interpreters, and accessibility accommodations is the second greatest need, with training being the third. Well, that's actually quite fascinating. And again, if we didn't list a resource need that you personally have, please do put it in the chat box. Wow. Thoughts, Marcy?
Thank you very much, Kat. I'm also going to look at the others that are coming in on the chat box. And those include volunteers, addressing systemic violence and mental health, our elected officials to be held accountable, assistive, rehabilitative, and adaptive technologies to suit the needs of various persons with disabilities, accessible information and communication technologies, person-to-person compassion is a big one, even in business, funding to support, provide stipends for caregivers, interpreter access, accessible information, humane leadership.
Totally.
These are really important identification of really important needs. We also just heard need home ventilator supplies, food deliveries, meeting dietary needs. And you know, feel free to keep adding to that list. And while people keep sharing that, we are going to turn to our next speaker. Our next speaker is someone who I've been spending virtually every day with. Thanks to the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, we have a large group of people focusing on disability rights and the needs of people with disabilities in the pandemic. And one of our daily partners who has been with us is Kelly Israel from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. So I'm going to turn to Kelly so she can talk about what ASAN is working on.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
First off, I apologize for spamming you with my presence, Marcy, but that's how the cookie crumbles. As stated earlier, my name is Kelly Israel, and I am a policy analyst at the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, or ASAN. ASAN is a United States-based 501c3. That's our nonprofit designation for those overseas. A nonprofit advocacy organization created by and for autistic people ourselves. In short, we are an all autistic, that is, everybody who works at our organization is autistic, including me, disability rights organization advocating for the self-determination and civil rights of autistic people at the local, state, and national level in the US. And so, as you might expect, we have, like all other disability rights organizations, become deeply committed to ensuring that the toll that COVID-19 is taking on disabled lives is known, and that the rights of people with disabilities during this horrific pandemic are respected. So to that end, ASAN is creating a COVID-19 tracking tool. And that tracking tool records the number of confirmed COVID-19 infections and deaths in residents who live in congregate settings in the United States. So by congregate settings, we mean locations where large numbers of primarily people with disabilities live, where they have very little choice and control. So we're thinking of settings that are very similar to the institutions that Eric Rosenthal described, although some would not describe themselves as such. We're talking nursing homes, psychiatric hospitals, some veterans homes in the United States, group homes, institutions that house mostly people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Some countries call these individuals people with learning disabilities, which means something totally different in the US, but terminology aside. And assisted living facilities that help people with Alzheimer's disease. We're talking places where there are large numbers of disabled people clustered together and isolated from the broader community. So one of our reasons for tracking specifically congregate settings was to try and create a means of determining and sharing publicly the incalculable death toll for people with disabilities during this pandemic. We're using congregate settings because residents of these places are most likely members of our community, and because so many of us live there, deprived of control of our own lives, and as Eric has pointed out, in deplorable conditions often enough. Another way was to try and show the damage that congregate settings wreak on the health of people with disabilities due to their design. Congregate settings cluster people with high risk of complications from a severe illness together and restrict their movement. These institutions are hotbeds of COVID-19 activity. There are some states where they make up over 70% of the cases or the death toll from COVID-19. So in the United States, where we're running this tracker, we collect three kinds of data. One, individual reliable news articles from media outlets online, either from local news channels and websites, statewide websites, or nationally prominent outlets like CNN and NBC National. These articles typically list the number of resident infections and sometimes deaths in a specific congregate setting. So like there could be an article from a local newspaper which describes the number of infections and deaths that have occurred at a specific local nursing home in Missouri or something, for example, and that goes into the tracker. Then we've got reports and news articles that give the data for specific entire counties within a state. So many of you probably already know this, but the states in the United States are divided into individual counties. And some news articles give the numbers for a specific county, like, say, Prince George's County in Maryland, for example, and we include that data in the tracker too. So the third kind of data we add in there are reports and news articles which provide some of the numbers for an entire state, such as data released by state health agencies. So for instance, Maryland's Department of Health and Human Services or something. Data released from these agencies on COVID-19 infections and deaths in long-term care facilities, which are usually nursing homes and psychiatric institutions exclusively, but there's a rule in the United States from an agency called CMS, which says that each state has to release data on how many COVID-19 infections and deaths occur in long-term care facilities. And as far as I know, no state has interpreted this requirement with any consistency with any of the others. Some of them interpret it to mean only nursing homes. Some of them interpret it to mean everything from group homes to psychiatric hospitals. But the short version is that the data is not comprehensive, and that's why we still exist. It doesn't cover all of the settings that we're thinking about, all of these isolated settings where people with disabilities live and are taken away from the broader community. So, of these three kinds of data we collect, we input all this data into an Excel spreadsheet, which uses a formula to sort of add it all together and get accurate numbers for the state, for the counties, and for each setting. So the data isn't perfect. Sometimes we don't have enough accurate information, or the data blends numbers from residents and staff together. We only want data on the number of infections and deaths for residents, not the data for staff, because these aren't people with disabilities. We're also mostly using the highest available numbers because we believe that COVID-19 cases in these congregate settings are being undercounted and underreported. But we're doing our best to keep it as accurate as possible. So with this information out there, by virtue of collecting it, disability rights advocates in the United States can utilize it to make arguments for community-based services for people with disabilities and to try to evaluate the damage that's been done to our community by these places and by COVID-19. We do plan on keeping ourselves involved in the disability rights and disaster space beyond COVID-19 and beyond this project and the disaster we're going through as an international and national community right now. I was already a member of a local, that is District of Columbia, the city that I live in, advisory committee working on disaster preparedness before the pandemic struck. And I plan to ramp up my involvement in disability rights disaster preparedness task forces throughout the movement. We want to make sure that the voices of actual people with intellectual and developmental disabilities are heard, so that our rights and needs, when the worst comes to pass, are respected and understood. The main thing we're in need of at this stage of our project, we do have a grant to do this, are volunteers. At the moment, the COVID-19 tracker is being run by 3 people, and one of them is me. Never a good idea. But no, in all seriousness, I'm one person who's entering most of the data, and I rarely have enough time to do it all in my day. We've created an online form for people to submit information to the tracker, which is mostly designed for individual settings, but we're trying to get it set up so that state by state, it can be included. Any help that people can give, just bringing new data to our attention and inputting new data into the tracker is greatly appreciated. We need all the help we can get to get this thing in order. And thanks so much for giving me the floor for this 3 to 5 minutes. I was happy to share. And if you see any individual settings or data that should be drawn to our attention, please submit it to the form. I'd be happy to input it into the tracker.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And I was especially pleased to hear that you are going to continue to work on disability and disaster. Unfortunately, before the global pandemic, there were not a lot of folks working on what happens before, during, and after disasters for people with disabilities. It's wonderful that there has been much more interest during the pandemic, and we are extremely hopeful that people will stay involved with the leadership of organizations like the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, and your persistence, Kelly, and the persistence of your team. I have great hope that we will make very significant progress in the inclusion and leadership of people with intellectual developmental disabilities, and our siblings who are really counting on us to continue to elevate issues around institutionalization and disasters. So thank you very much. And I have several people in the queue. And so we're going to be mindful of time. I think all of the folks who had requested in advance have had the opportunity to speak. And now we're excited to have some additional folks. So I think first we're going to turn to an old and fabulous disability. You're not old friend and fabulous disability rights leader, Allan Holdsworth. Allan, please go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'm going to do a very, very short thing here for you. We are planning a worldwide event in December around the United Nations International Day. We've already got countries like Australia, Brazil, America, Europe, all we're starting to work together. It's going to be called Thrive Aid. And it's going to be a mixture of disability arts and disability information and disability protest. So it's going to be a 24-hour event, so it's going to go all the way around the world. And I'm going to put in the chat line the link to it. And if anyone would like to get involved with that, you know, from whatever country you're in, then just go to this Facebook group and request to be joined. Oh, that's the wrong one, sorry. I'll put it in that's the garage. Sorry. But I will put it in a couple of seconds. I'll put that link in. It's a Facebook group at the moment. We've had like about 4 meetings now, and we are looking now for people to join us and get in touch. And if you want to talk about this afterwards, that's great. I mean, it's just something I can do, you know. It's something positive I can put out there so that disabled people around the world can talk about, you know, what's happening in their country, what's happening, but also actually just show that we have some strength and we will thrive. We will survive this, most of us. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Allan. This sounds like a wonderful opportunity, and we very much encourage everyone to get involved, and you can certainly count us in. Next, I am going to turn to Lisa Seaman, who has joined us and would like to speak. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Marcy and Kat. I work for CNICT, but more importantly, I facilitate a task force on accessibility for people with learning and cognitive disabilities inside the W3C for WorkAg who make the international standards for the web and web accessible content. So we've been making this big document of guidance on what to do to accommodate people with learning and cognitive disabilities. And then COVID came along, and we became very well aware that this large comprehensive document that takes you through the whole life cycle of making content was too long. I had a look for some grants, but honestly, as a slightly slow reader, they were beyond me. So we just did it. We made a few additional one pages, 10 tips on what to do to make content more usable for people with cognitive and learning disabilities. And then a short page for getting started points, if you like. So if you have 10 minutes, or if you have an hour, or if you have 3 days to start making content, what do you have to do? Because what was happening, or at least what was happening to me, is if I was trying to get information, it was hard to get that information. Then there'd be on the web, then there'd be a phone number, and the phone number takes me to one of these awful menu systems. And if you don't have good communication skills and good short-term memory, you can't manage the combination of skills required to get to help. So you can't get to help. And then this is people living alone have less contact than they used to. So this is for people who aren't in the institutions but are at home. They can normally manage, but now they don't have their normal help support system coming in on a regular basis or at all. And then where do they find out? You know, I was trying to find out, am I a vulnerable person? I couldn't get that information from anyone. So that kind of thing is more critical now. It's always important. But now with lockdowns and stuff, it's even more important that people can access this information and get the help they need independently, and that's the key word. So we've made this additional guidance, really short, pointed advice that even if you just have 10 minutes, you could look at and pick something up. And hopefully that will help people get the information they need. So I think what we'd really like is for it to get out to the people writing the content, that they should be aware that this content exists to support them, support us, right? And I'm also extremely happy for any comments, what should be changed, both the full guidance and the tips and the getting started. So that's okay, I'll put it in the chat, and if anyone can disseminate it, send it out, that'd be lovely, very appreciated. And if anyone wants to contribute, always happy, always need more people.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Great and important work, and we'll be sure to share it around. We always appreciate the work that comes from the W3ICT and the work that is coming out around communication accessibility.
Thank you.
We have a comment from Facebook. Kat, would you like to share that comment?
Absolutely. So I have one here that says, listening from the UK, I feel that the world has not listened to or recognized the positive contributions to the world. People in the USA are not being supported and helped with this COVID-19. Disability is being used as an instrument to say their life is not important. And I have one more. We, the Northamptonshire British Polio Fellowship, have been here in the global virus pandemic epidemic before with polio in the 1920s to the 1950s, with many of us being placed in full body length ventilators or iron lungs. Many of us survived and are still living today. And thanks to the development of a polio vaccine in the 50s, polio is not around today. However, there are, in recent years, many parents who are refusing to vaccinate their children of polio or measles, and thus there is fear of old pandemics and epidemics coming back around the corner, in addition to COVID. Hopefully, a vaccine against COVID-19 is developed, and it will be accepted worldwide that vaccinations are really important. Thank you. So those are some comments we had on Facebook.
Thank you, Kat. And I have one other from Zan Thornton. How do we disabled become valued? Bill A has ALS. So when his awful nursing facility got COVID, his family signed a DNR soon as he went to the emergency room. Luckily, his friends, advocates, the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategy, WID, and friends got DNR not implemented. He's alive, off vent, and getting a local Center for Independent Living and friends to transition him to a better place. The question is, he lived because of advocacy, but how many of us will die because of the devaluation of our lives? What can we do? Of course, many things, but your suggestions, please, including nonviolent protest. Thank you. It's your message, Zan, is a really important one, bringing folks together through this forum, continuing our active participation led by organizations like the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, Inclusiva, and those of us who are focusing on disability rights and disasters. These are all the important things that we can do. And we invite our interested partners from business and industry, our corporate and foundation funders who have come to us and asked us how they can be more targeted in how they can support disability-led organizations in preparing for, responding to, and recovering from disasters. We've heard what you all have said, we've heard what they have said, and we have a clear mandate to move forward with the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration. We will be rolling out the Alliance on July 9th. We will invite all of you to be with us as we move from words into action. And more information will be coming. We're very excited to have so many people from so many places joining together, and we follow your lead when you tell us what's important and when you tell us what it is that's needed. So as we wrap up, I want to turn back to Kat, who will be providing us with our closing poll. And this one will be shared now, and then the results will be shared in our follow-up. So Kat, please share that final poll.
Yeah, thank you, Marcy. So I'm launching it right this moment. The question we have as our our last poll is, would you like to participate in a Twitter town hall, continuing this discussion? And we have quite a bit of folks voting, 37-47. We have 67% yes, 33% no, but we're still getting some votes in.
And this is a really important question, because we want to know whether Twitter is a mechanism, a technology tool that folks want us to incorporate in addition to these kinds of discussions. We'll also be asking you later on as a follow-up about other technological strategies for engaging discussion. So, oh, I guess we are going to share the final results.
Oh, we sure did. So we're at 63% yes and 37% no. So it doesn't look like Twitter is for everybody, but the majority would be very interested in a Twitter town hall.
And with that, I want to once again thank all of you for making the time and making the effort to be with us. We are very appreciative of all that you're doing, and we look forward to having you all join us on July 9th and in the work that we're doing before, during, and after disasters as we move forward. Thank you to each of you, and please keep letting us know what it's going to take for us to collectively do a better job in all aspects of our inclusion. Thank you very much, and be safe and well. See you soon.